So what do you do when you get sacked from your genre-defining band and you have no plans and nowhere to go? Do you A. Take the 96,000 pounds off your share of the name and lock yourself away for 3 months and do loads of coke and booze? Or do you B. come back with a vengeance and record the best album you ever recorded? Well, if you are the Prince of Darkness, the answer is both. So hello everybody and welcome to a new video and welcome to my channel where we talk about everything music from death metal to Queen and everything in between. On today's video, I'll be reviewing Ozzy Osbourne's debut album, The Blizzard of Oz. So how about that intro? That's actually ridiculous, but it's true. He actually did lock himself away for 3 months and went on a frenzy of booze and coke because according to Ozzy himself, he was just thinking, you know, this is my last party because after this, I am going back to Birmingham and the Dole. But fate had something else in store for him. So before we actually get to the album, a little backstory. Ozzy Osbourne was of course the lead singer for Black Sabbath, and in 1979 he actually got kicked off for doing too much drugs. Imagine that, you got kicked out of Black Sabbath for doing too much drugs. But that's what happened. And then Ozzy, to defend himself, actually went on record to say that it was actually unfair, not because he wasn't on drugs all the time, but because he wasn't any better or worse than anybody else in the band, as far as the drugs and the alcohol went. So yeah, great defense, dude. So needless to say, Ozzy actually got depressed and was down in the dumps, and he was just getting ready to go back to his hometown to work, when luckily Don Arden came to the rescue and signed him to Jet Records with the sole purpose of him recording some new material. And right after Don signed Ozzy to this label, he sent his daughter Sharon to Los Angeles to look after Ozzy's needs and take care of him whatever they were. And that she did. That she did. Of course, Don Arden's idea was that Sharon was going to look after his investment, and he really just wanted Ozzy to straighten up and eventually go back to Black Sabbath, a band Don Arden was managing at the time. So whatever, he figured Ozzy will make a new band, get it out of his system, and then just, you know, get bored with it or whatever, and then go back home to Black Sabbath. He was so convinced of that he actually pitched to Ozzy the idea to name his new band Son of Sabbath, which Ozzy hated and discarded immediately. Alright, so having Ozzy on board and signed, they went on to look for musicians so they could find a backing band for this guy. According to some sources, they actually wanted to get Gary Moore involved, but Gary was like, nah, I'm not doing that. But he did, however, help them out big time, because Gary Moore's band, G-Force, actually helped them try out and audition musicians for the band. Gary Moore actually said, and I quote, "If drummers were trying out, I would play guitar, and if bassists were trying out, my drummer would actually help them out." We felt sorry for him, basically. Ouch. Anyway, by late 1979 and under the management of the Ardens, Ozzy Osbourne assembled a team of musicians and went on to form the Blizzards of Oz, which was actually the band name all the band members agreed on. So the Blizzards of Oz would feature drummer Lee Kerslake of Uriah Heep, bassist lyricist Bob Daisley of Rainbow and later Uriah Heep, keyboardist Don Airey of Rainbow and later Deep Purple, and the guitar legend Randy Rhoads of Quiet Riot. Now finally, with the team assembled, they went on to Ridge Farm Studio to commence recording. Famously, Chris Tsangarides was actually hired to be the producer of the album, and Max Norman was going to be the engineer of the album. But after a few sessions, the band grew tired and weren't happy with Chris's work, so Max took over as the producer. He wasn't credited for it, but he went on to produce the following Ozzy Osbourne albums. Alright, so let's get into the album itself. Released in September 12th, 1980 in the UK and March 27th of 1981 in the US, it is roughly about 39 minutes and 31 seconds of pure awesome. It starts out with I Don't Know, and what I do know is that our main riff is catchy as all hell, very iconic, very Randy Rhoads. It's a mid-paced banger, very rock and roll, with a very cool bridge right before Randy's first solo on the album, which takes us straight to song number 2, and that's Crazy Train. And what can I say about that song? I mean, it's been a rock radio station staple forever. Not one day goes by where Miami's big 105.9 radio station doesn't play that song. And they gotta. I mean, after a while, you almost expect it to come on. Also, having worked in the music retail business for over 10 years, I've heard that riff being played so many times, it's ridiculous. Way more than Stairway to Heaven. Way more. I've also heard it misplayed more times than I've heard it played right, but that's a whole nother story. Song number 3 on this album is one of my favorite songs on the entire Ozzy Osbourne discography. It was the first song they actually wrote as a band, and it's called Goodbye to Romance, and it basically talks about Ozzy being kicked out of Black Sabbath and his whole music career dreams just being shattered, but you know, he rose like a phoenix off of the ashes. Really cool, slow, ballady song with a great Randy Rhoads solo. And speaking of Randy Rhoads solo, number 4 is Randy Rhoads by himself, solo, literally. The song is called D, and it's a song he wrote for his mother, and it just features Randy Rhoads on classical guitar. A beautiful piece of music. Now, side A on the vinyl actually ends with the most controversial song on this album, which was Suicide Solution, which reminds me, I really need to get this on vinyl. So if any of you guys have one laying around that you just want to get rid of, I'll be happy to take it off of your hands. So what's so controversial about the song? Nothing really, but in 1985, a lawsuit was actually filed against Ozzy Osbourne and the label by the parents of John Daniel McCollum, who took his life allegedly after listening to that song. Luckily, the lawsuit was actually dismissed, but the song didn't get much airplay after that. Now, the song itself is actually kind of cool, you know, it's got a very memorable riff, and the lyrics, according to Ozzy, were about Bon Scott's death, who of course was the singer on AC/DC and a big friend of Ozzy's. Now, we flip the album over to side B, and what do we get? We get Mr. Crowley, one of the most awesome and famous songs from this album and of all of Ozzy's career. It heavily features and highlights all of Randy's prowess on the guitar. You know, the riffing is cool, it's heavy, it's mid-paced, but once we get to the first and second solos, hot damn. The first solo is just a frantic thing on the pentatonic scale, really cool stuff. But then when we get to the second solo, he gets really melodic with a lot of neoclassical influences, which he basically gets by raising the 7th note on the D minor scale, and it just sounds awesome and dark and haunting and beautiful at the same time. It's just an amazing solo. I've actually covered it on the channel, so if you want to check it out, I'll link to it on the description box below, but it's a really cool, really awesome solo. Now, the next song, No Bone Movies, actually gets overshadowed by Mr. Crowley and the next song because they're like amazing, epic songs, but it's a really good song on its own merit, and it just gets overlooked because of, you know, the awesomeness of side B of this album. But man, just sit down and listen to it by itself, and you know, it's a very catchy, very rock and roll song with a really cool riff and a really cool solo. And I know I'm saying that a lot throughout this album, but I mean, it's jam-packed with awesome riffs and solos throughout the album. What can I do? And thus, we get to my favorite song on the album, Revelation, Mother Earth, which may very well be my favorite Ozzy Osbourne song. I mean, it's either this or Diary of a Madman. Two amazing songs. They're both longer songs with a lot of segments and a lot of key changes and a lot of complex and intricate arrangements that make out an awesome epic song. They both have some of the best lyrics in the Ozzy Osbourne catalog, and man, the acoustic interludes and guitar solos are just next level. Awesome stuff. And thus we get to the last song on the album. But before we get to that and the bonus tracks and the 2002 re-release, which sucked, let me just take a second to thank all of my members and patrons for supporting me on this new year. And let me seize the opportunity to tell you that if you really enjoy the content and you want to help support the channel big time, please consider becoming a patron to the channel. A little goes a long way, and we surely do appreciate it. And if not, just drop me a like and a comment in the comment section down below to help me out with the YouTube algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel like a man if you haven't yet. It's free and it helps the channel out. Alright, so on with the show. Finally, we get to the last song, which is Steal Away the Night, which also has an awesome riff. It's a very rock and roll song. It's fast-paced, it's short, it's in and out, and it closes the album awesomely. Now let's get to the controversial 2002 reissue, which it's pretty bogus. In 1986, Kerslake and Daisley sued Osbourne for unpaid royalties to the first album, this guy right here, and eventually winning their due credits on the songwriting on this album and on Diary of a Madman. So in 2002, when they re-released the album, somebody had the great idea to re-record the bass and the drums, purely out of spite, and people hated it. And with good reason. I mean, you can check it out online if you want to, but if you've got 30 minutes and 31 seconds to listen to an album, go listen to the original recording, the original master. That's the best one. Which takes me to the bonus tracks, which are 2 songs that were actually recorded by the band, but that didn't make it to the album. One of them was actually included in the 2002 re-release as a bonus track, You Looking at Me, Looking at You, and it was actually a B-side to Crazy Train, the single. So it did come out in the 80s, but it never made it to an actual album until that 2002 re-release. And the last song I'm going to talk about is a song called You Said It All. Apparently, when they were still working on their first song, Goodbye to Romance, they went to the studio to work on it and mix it and stuff, and they were told by Jet Records, the label, that they actually wanted to do a different song for the single. So they came up with this song, You Said It All, and never actually got to record it. And the only recording you can find of that is from 1980's Ozzy Osbourne Live EP. Anyway guys, awesome story, awesome album. But is it my favorite Ozzy Osbourne album? Check this video out and find out.